A few years ago, the UN issued a dire report. 1 million species of plants and animals are on the verge of extinction. And right now, one of the species most at risk, the North Atlantic right whale, faces some of its greatest threats in the waters off the coast of New England.
Human action is killing these whales, and human action has the ability to save them.
If nothing happens, in 20 years there will be no more reproducing females. That's the projection. It's pretty gruesome.
If we let this species go extinct on our watch, we all have to live with that.
Over the past decade, climate change and warming waters have pushed North Atlantic right whales out of their usual migration paths and more often right into the paths of fishing boats and fishing lines. Today, there are fewer than 400 left. An award-winning documentary dives in efforts to save the species, which have put conservationists up against the lobster industry, with federal regulators charged with protecting them both stuck in the middle. It's called Entangled, and it's airing tomorrow night on GBH's The World Channel in honor of Earth Day. I was joined yesterday by one of the filmmakers, David Abel, who won a Pulitzer in 2014 for breaking news coverage of the Boston Marathon bombing, along with his colleagues from the Boston Globe, where he's now an environmental reporter. David, congratulations. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
David, what is the best guess as to how many right whales are alive today?
So when I started making this film, the estimate was that there were roughly 411 right whales remaining. Last fall, that estimate by the same scientist plummeted to 356. So we've seen a 25% decline in the population over just the past decade.
You know, one of the most frightening parts of this is that you can name what you believe to be the exact number of members of this species that still exist. Well, I learned from your film that the cause of death in almost all these cases is human. Ship strikes, entanglements, meaning that line that goes from the buoy to the lobster pot, and climate change. Let's go down the list if we can. Even though ships, I didn't know this either, even though ships don't see a whale on their radar, ship strikes have declined, I think, dramatically. Why is that?
Well, in the 1990s, the federal government passed serious regulations that actually controlled speeds, set up shipping lanes, and alerted mariners. And there's a whole network to alert mariners when right whales are in waters that they might be transiting, that they have to reduce their speeds, they have to stay in certain areas. And that played a key role in reducing the death toll from ship strikes.
Entanglements. I have to say the images were so painful, not either seeing entangled whales or formerly entangled whales that died. Here's a little model that you use describing what it looks like when a whale becomes entangled. And just so that people understand, the problem when they become entangled, as I understand it, is their inability to go to the surface to take in air. Is that what the problem is?
Well, there are multiple problems. So as you can see in that demonstration, effectively what happens is when they hit these lines, they either get stuck in their flippers, sometimes they get stuck in their baleen. They're often feeding with their mouths wide open, and they can't really see the lines. And so when they often hit them, they roll, and it can wrap around their mouths. It can harm them in many ways. So often they're dragging heavy gear with these trawl lines that include a bunch of lobster pots, and they could swim with them for hundreds of miles sometimes, which weakens them. It gouges into their skin. It can carve into their bones and slowly, effectively kill them.
You know, I am the least technologically competent person you've probably ever met. But even I, as I'm watching this film, say to myself, there's got to be some sort of thing without the rope line that these lobstermen and women could use. And then lo and behold, you start talking about ropeless technology, which exists, which means they wouldn't become entangled in anything. There'd be a signal, and all of a sudden, the lobster pot would float up from the bottom. Is what stands between the technology and its use, is it purely about money, or does the technology still need some advancement?
Well, it's a combination of both. First of all, I would say that, number one, the technology remains in somewhat of a formative state. So, there are hiccups. It's, there are some challenges, but there are a lot of really complicated, challenging problems in this world. The issues of the plummeting population of the North Atlantic right whale is not really one of them. We know how to save them, and that would either involve removing as much of the rope from the water column as possible, and those are, as you mentioned, the vertical buoy lines that extend from the surface to the sea floor, and also trying to find new technology. The basic problem, as you hinted at, is right now the cost is just, not reasonable for the average lobsterman to bear. But, we subsidize lots of different industries in this country. We provide billions of dollars to agricultural industries. So if we made a decision, especially in this world of trillion-dollar rescue packages and infrastructure plans, we could effectively subsidize what is the transition to what is the nation's most valuable fishery, the lobster industry.
To listen to the lobstermen and women in your film, and we're going to play a little sound from a couple of them in a second, their contention is it's extinction versus extinction. Potential extinction, likely extinction in 2 decades of the right whale versus likely extinction of their livelihoods. Here's 2 of the fishermen who were featured or at least covered in your film.
I sat here and listened to environmentalist after environmentalist tell me what a murderous individual I am.
My opinion about the whales, what more can we do? Eventually they're going to die off. It's going to happen no matter what.
Is there a middle ground, David? I know they cut a deal that the fishermen in Maine backed out of at some point. There's NOAA, there's Congress. Is there a fix that could save both species, the lobstermen and the whales?
So I think that's really what this film is about. This film looks at the very difficult challenge that this conflicted federal agency, the National Marine Fisheries Service, has. And they bring together fishermen, scientists, federal and state regulators to try to figure out how to reduce serious injuries and mortalities by between 60 and 80%. That was the goal set out. The problem is that we actually thought we sort of had the end of the film, which now is sort of the middle of the film, where it seemed like there was this historic agreement after years of efforts to try to bring these stakeholders together. And then, of course, what we learn and see happen in the film is that one of the major groups, the fishermen in Maine and the congressional delegation in Maine, decided that they were no longer going to accept this agreement, and they lobbied the Trump administration to try to stop efforts to impose regulations on the lobster industry, and they succeeded for much of the last year. And the rules or the proposed regulations that came out of this meeting were put in a kind of regulatory black hole, and by court order, they have to be completed rules by the end of next month.
Well, I'll tell you, as someone who's been lucky enough off Cape Cod to see a couple of these beautiful animals up close, I hope the conservation effort succeeds, and I think your film is a huge part of that success should it happen. David, thank you so much for your work and your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You can watch Entangled tomorrow at 9 p.m. on GBH's The World Channel.